I think most of us can agree that one of the most exciting things about springtime is seeing a place that looked dead and forgotten, and now new life is rising out of it. As the Irish planted their potatoes around St. Patrick's Day in the spring of 1845, they were full of hope, breaking apart that fallow earth to take in their staple crop. The potato, native to South America, commonly thought to have been introduced to Ireland by Sir Walter Raleigh in 1589, was rich in potassium, protein, and other minerals and vitamins. It became a supplementary food until the beginning of the 1800s, when it had become the Irish's primary source of food. They would eat potatoes to every meal. Their population not only thrived, but had almost tripled by 1840. Though the majority of the Irish was still impoverished, they were hopeful. The blight, known as the fungus Phytophthora infestans, was not the first blight to come to Ireland. The potato's downside is that it is prone to disease and blight, and there had been enough of that wherever it was planted to show that using the potato as a staple crop was unreliable. This new blight was spreading in America for 2 years before it started to cross the sea. The Irish had heard reports of this blight in America, but they did not yet feel alarmed. Once the blight reached Europe, it spread rapidly. Many farmers went out in September of 1845 to harvest their potatoes, only to find sudden destruction and devastation instead. By the end of October, beginning of November, it was estimated that 1/3 of the whole nation's potato crop was lost. This was only the beginning. By 1851, 1 million Irish men, women, and children had died of disease and direct starvation. Over 1 million more had emigrated to Britain, Australia, and America. My great-great-great-great-grandparents on my father's side lived through this time. I wish I knew their story, but I know that without the grace of God, their courage, sacrifices, and perseverance, I would not be here today. Although Irish immigrants had been coming to the United States since colonial times, the potato blight caused a second wave of immigration to America. In the 1840s, nearly half of the immigrants to America were Irish. It wasn't quite the poorest who came, but those who had just enough money to pay for the ship's passage, often meaning that when they landed on their shores, they were destitute. Because of this, and often to save money as well to send back home to loved ones, they would take whatever job they could possibly find or fight for. Pre-famine, it was the males who were the predominant Irish immigrants. During the famine, and the aftermath of which, whole families left Ireland and came to America. But something I was surprised to learn was that later, the majority shifted to women, mostly teen or young adult single women of those. And the number one job the Irish woman took on that American women didn't want themselves? A domestic servant, commonly and degradingly called a Bridget or a biddy. Many Irish women were named after Saint Bridget, but this kind of Bridget or biddy was not an honor. They often colored them as crass, crude, and ape-like. In America, more often than not, domestic servants didn't wear a uniform beyond an apron when not with the family or with guests, and maybe a cap, which many loathed. In fact, one of the quote-unquote problems with these Bridgets was that they often dressed above their station, making it hard to know who was of the household and who was of the help. An Irish domestic servant could have been a maid, a cook, or a nanny, or sometimes all three. They were expected to be dressed and ready to work by 7 o'clock or earlier, at least an hour before the household awoke. And she would often work until 10 o'clock at night.
What's that? She not who has 14. What are you doing? Should I do that? 24 or old? Where did I laugh?
I had to wonder what these young women thought of the mothers that they worked for. Back in Ireland, for most Irish, the whole family worked hard together, whether it was in farms or having to go to a workhouse or a mill, where even young children had to work long hours. Back over here in America, here is a mistress in an upper middle class or upper class home who now had a nanny to take care of her children, perhaps a governess or a tutor to also teach them, a cook to cook meals for her family and the other servants, a maid to clean the house and prepare rooms for guests, and even help the mistress to get dressed herself and do her hair. Side note, with all these complicated layers of clothing, I can totally understand needing help with getting dressed though. Though surrounded by people, family, every day, a domestic servant was not part, and often felt lonely, separated from those that she knew. Catholic Mass was often the only time she actually got to see those of her own people. Yet, she did not give up. She was paid room, board, and even some extra that she could send back to family in her homeland. Though around 60% of the first generations of women had to work very hard, especially in these services, to come out of destitution, for their daughters and granddaughters, only 19% of them had to do the same. My grandpa, on my dad's side, has done a lot of research when it comes to our ancestors. Many of them came from the British Isles and from Ireland. From his dad's side, they were more Scot-Irish, but included a man named Benjamin Fleming, who worked on the Erie Canal and married a woman who was part African. This picture, though hazy, still a treasure, as my grandpa said. It is a picture of his maternal grandmother, her siblings, and her parents. Descendants of the Glennons, Kavanagh, Coleman, Kanes, and Quigleys. Edward Glennon was born in 1810 and married Mary Kavanagh. They had John Glennon, who was born in 1832, and married Margaret Coleman, who was born in 1848. They both came over to the United States around 1865. They had a son named Edward Glennon, who was born in 1873 and married Hannah Kane, one of the girls pictured in that black and white photo. She came from parents William Kane, born in 1835, and Margaret Quigley, born in 1835. At the start of the Great Hunger of 1845, Edward Glenning and his wife Mary would have been not just adults, but also parents of 12-year-old John Glennon. John's future wife, Margaret, would have been born in the midst of the Great Famine, just near the end in 1848. When they both married, they came over in 1865. This, as we know, was also during the American Civil War, a very hard time to come over as immigrants. On the other side of the family, William Kane and Margaret Quigley Kane were both 10 years old when the Great Hunger started. I don't know when they came over to the United States, but there they are pictured with their children, the date approximately 1885 to 1890, in the backyard of someone's house. The places back in Ireland most affected by the famine, starvation, and death were the Gaelic communities. Their language suffered, their culture suffered. Ireland has come far in trying to regain that back. In America, many of those from Ireland who came over never went back home. They often sent money back so that more could come. Chain migration. But here in America, they found ways to still honor their homeland. They still married good Catholic boys and girls, those from their church. They tried to regain their song. They loved their dances, trying to remember the good old days back on the Emerald Isle. There has been war and hard times in every culture of our past and our present. And yet, it is our past history that can teach us what mistakes to try to avoid, even in a sin-cursed world, and what positive things we need to not only hold on to, but strengthen to get better at. Everyone will experience hardships in a sin-cursed world. And yet, it is through these hardships that we know what is really the most important. Our family, loved ones, friends, our beliefs. God, who can get us through even the toughest of times. America is a place where dreams can come true, where hard work can get you far. Now, we wonder, what is most important? Both parents are often working outside the home. We have awesome conveniences like a washer and dryer, a dishwasher, Instacart, pickup. And yet, are we missing out on so many things because of convenience? Did our forefathers work so hard so that we can get to this place in our lives where our families are set aside or neglected? That just taking it slow, getting your hands in the flour, seems terrible instead of relaxing. Or spending time with your kids, teaching them just basic skills, is somehow demeaning. And yet these are skills they can use throughout their entire life.
Be thou my vision, O Lord of my heart, not be all else to me, save as thou art. Thou my best thought, by day or by wisdom, and thou my true word. I ever with thee, and thou with me, Lord. Thou my great Father, and thy true Son. Thou in me dwelling, and I with thee one.
Be thou my battle shield, sword for the fight. Be thou my dignity, thou my delight. Thou my soul's shelter, thou my high tower. Raise thou me heavenward, O power of my power.
Riches I heed not, nor man's empty praise. Thou mine inheritance, now and always. Thou and thou only first in my heart. My King of heaven, my treasure thou art.
Just as this potato plant that somehow survived being forgotten and neglected for 3 months in my basement is now growing, so to me, anyway, it seems to be the story of the Irish. Though there was hardship, so much death and suffering, they pressed on and never gave up, and we, their descendants, owe them so much.